And we're live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Stories and Sips, our weekly live stream, our chance to get together, to hang out, have a bit of crack together. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Let me put up some banners up here. Let me know what you're drinking. Let me know where you are and what you're drinking. I'm going to put up a question on the screen here. We've got some great guests this evening. See a few of you joining already. Great stuff. Peter, good to see you. Ed, Martin, nice to have you here. Glad you're all joining in again. Great to see the familiar faces. So this is our Stories and Sips Irish Whiskey lock-in every Friday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. It feels like day number 1,256 of quarantine. Our hair is getting longer and our thirst is getting greater. But we meet here once a week so that we don't have to drink alone, so that we can meet each other virtually, raise a glass together, have a bit of crack, and enjoy each other's company. It's the end of another long week, more long weeks ahead, and hopefully the live stream takes us away from the worries that we have on a day-to-day basis and allows us to focus on each other and our health and our glass of whiskey, and sure, what harm, and no better place to be. So it's great to see everybody joining in again. Chris and Richard and Shane. Shane's from Lucan. Steve Ward. Hi, Steve. JJ Quigley. Good man, JJ. Greg from Ohio. Al. Good man, Al. Good to see you. Your Bushmills MP. Peter. Fantastic. Steve's got his tealing. There's Michael Cully. Hi, Michael. Let me see. Joe Moore. Hello, Europe. This is Ireland. Great. Joe's got his Eurovision Song Contest hat on already. Steve Ward's got his tealing renaissance. Beautiful. Great stuff. Evening to you, Sean O'Neill, as well. Cassandra Hare, good to see you again. And Risa, Wayne. Wayne is drinking a glass of the JJ Corrie Gold Rush. I have it behind me on the shelf, the lower shelf you see there, Wayne. There's JJ Corrie Gold Rush as well. So we got a great night ahead of us tonight. We have whiskey, as you'd expect, it being an Irish whiskey lock-in. We have guests, which is great. We'll have a bit of crack. We'll answer questions. We'll have the chat. I've enjoyed watching you all chat with each other through these live streams and get to know each other, which has been fantastic. And we are all set for a good old evening. So there's I have 3 drinks that I'm going to have tonight. The first is going to be Bua Irish Whiskey, and I'm going to bring on Martin Kennedy, the co-founder of Bua, the Bua Irish Whiskey Company, shortly to talk to us. We're going to be drinking some Bua. I'm going to be drinking some Crested, Jameson Crested. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And I am going to be drinking a Jameson Black Barrel Old Fashioned, because we've got Mark Cooney, who's going to join us later on to introduce us to some amazing Irish whiskey cocktails that he's been working on, doing amazing things with Irish whiskey, the intersection of modern day Irish whiskey and history, Irish history, and taking his unique kind of a scientific, almost molecular approach to cocktail making, which he'll be sharing with us later. So Bua will be the first one in my glass. So delighted to see so many of you joining in. Aaron from Pennsylvania, great to have you. You just found us this week. Great stuff. You're very welcome. Trying a Hyde whiskey. Good man yourself. Jamie's having a bit of Crested up in Tyrone. Great stuff. I'll be sharing that with you. Nicholas has got a Powers 1817. Lovely, lovely stuff indeed. And Sean's drinking Powers John's Lane for the first time. I'd say now, Sean, it won't be the last time if you enjoy that drop anyway as much as I enjoy that drop. You'll be tasting that again and again and again. Stacy in Ohio is excited for Bua. Great Ohio following for Bua Irish Whiskey. I'm excited to share it with the rest of you who may not be as familiar with it. And hi to Lorcan and MP. And let me see, who else have we got? The Fultons are here from Ohio, which is fantastic. So last week I started with some Irish whiskey news because I thought this would be a great chance to share with you what's happening in the world of Irish whiskey. And as you'd imagine at the moment, there's not a whole lot happening because most of the functioning distilleries are either slowing down production or they are utilizing their stills to make hand sanitizer. They are taking care of frontline workers by supplying high-strength alcohol to be able to make hand sanitizer, which is fantastic. But there are a couple of things happening in the world of Irish whiskey. So let me go into those and share with you what is happening. So this week, we got news from JJ Corrie, the team at JJ Corrie, who launched a brand new whiskey today, and that's called the Hanson. Hanson Irish Whiskey from J.J. Corrie. They just launched that today. For those of you who are not familiar with J.J. Corrie is a whiskey bonder in the west of Ireland in County Clare. And Louise McGuan, who you can see in the top right-hand corner there, Louise is the founder of J.J. Corrie. There she is rolling a barrel in her rick house on the family farm in Cura Clare in County Clare. But they launched another expression this week. And in fact, they launched it this morning. And I'll read out to you some of the press release that I received from Louise. She said, as curators of casks, we're building a library of Irish whiskey flavors in order to create unique blends. And the Hanson perfectly reflects the matchmaking element encompassed in the art of Irish whiskey bonding, showcasing the best of Ireland's distilleries. So what we have here is a blend of grain whiskies from different Irish distilleries. 4 and 10-year old grain whiskies aged in ex-bourbon barrels, and each cask was selected to build complexity upon the sweet fruit qualities of the grain whiskey. The 4-year-old was matured on site in County Clare in ex-bourbon casks that they handpicked themselves in Louisville in Kentucky. And the Hanson is named actually after J.J. Corrie's son-in-law, who himself was a revenue inspector in the early 1900s. And he was known locally as the Gauger Hanson. So his job was to keep the whiskey bonders in check. So this is a hat tip to the Gauger Hanson. So it's great to see that even in these challenging times that we are still having some new whiskey releases. So kudos to Louise and her team for that release this week. Behind me on the lower shelf, you'll see a bottle of the Gold Rush from J.J. Corrie, which was released in California. And I announced that 2 weeks ago, I think, on the live stream as well. So delighted to see so many of you have joined in again this evening. I'm going to bring on a couple of guests this evening to share their expertise because, as we all know, there are far more interesting and educated people than me in the world of Irish whiskey and cocktails, and far better for me to bring them on and make me look good by their knowledge. And so we'll be bringing on in a minute our first guest to introduce us to his whiskey. So again, at any time, if you've got questions for our guests, for me, on the whiskey that we're drinking, feel free to pop a question in there. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. And we'll come back to questions a few times during our live stream and with the guests and make sure we get to as many as absolutely possible. All right, so Michael says he's got his Hanson ordered from J.J. Corrie. Let me see. John's Lane. People are loving John's Lane. This is Dahi saying evening, not able to join live. So we had Dahi on last week? I'm losing all track of time. Dahi from of Bill Phil, peated whiskey fame, W.D. O'Connell, whiskey merchants. Dahi just celebrated the birth of a new little boy. So congratulations, Dahi, on your new arrival as well. Brian Kelleher, welcome. Joe Moore, welcome. Caroline Brannigan, great to see you all. And Ed Powers, great to see you too. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine that I got to know in Ohio through the world of whiskey, and that is Mr. Martin Kennedy. Martin, how are you, sir?
Good now, not too bad, Barry. How are you getting on?
Doing very well. Where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from the sunny southeast of, well, not too sunny right in a minute, but the sunny southeast of Ireland, New Ross in County Wexford.
Is the sunny southeast a bit of an oxymoron, is it?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit of it's an ironic one, but we gloat about it to the rest of the country because the rest of the country is a little bit less sunny.
It's moderately more sunny in the southeast, so you'll trade on that anyway.
We have it lucky here. We definitely don't have it as lucky as it's looking there for you anyway.
There's a bit of sun shining on the side of my face. I don't know how long that's going to last for, but I'm trying to take advantage of the natural light for the live stream. That'll stop me, save me having to buy a light. So I just use the natural light for as long as I can. So, Martin, we met, I'd say now it's probably going back 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. We met in Ohio and I was doing whiskey tastings, doing some fundraisers, and we were doing, a mutual friend introduced us. She liked to, she liked meeting Irish people and connecting them, Sarah in Ohio, and she connected us together. And we did a tasting. You donated some of whiskeys from the company you were working with at the time, and we did a little bit of a tasting together. You now have your own whiskey company, which is a no small undertaking. Yeah,
it's not quite as big and well known just yet as the company I was working for back then. Yeah, no, I remember that. That was good fun. That was Patagonia, wasn't it? It was a Patagonia fundraiser that.
Pelotonia, yeah, we're the cancer research. We were fundraising for cancer research, for Pelotonia back in the day. And so tell us, Martin, before we talk about your whiskies, what were you doing at the time? Who were you working for? How did you get involved in Irish whiskey? Help set the stage for your journey towards running a whiskey company of your own.
Jesus, there's about 5 questions. The first one, I was working for Tullamore Dew at the time. Big Irish whiskey, big well-known Irish whiskey. I guess I got started with Tullamore Dew with. I've been a bit of a career gypsy up until the point that I got started with Tullamore Dew. I started off as a physical education teacher way back when, and then I went through everything from recruitment to bartending to almost started a brewing company right before I saw the opportunity to take a job with Tullamore Dew as a brand ambassador, and I never really took it that seriously. I never thought I'd actually end up even getting the job, to be honest. But I applied for it, and it's a great opportunity, a great job, given loads of freedom to do exactly what you want in a great industry. And I got to the next stage of the interview, and and eventually I ended up getting the job. And so I took the job to go out to Columbus, Ohio, to spread the good word of Irish whiskey to all the people out in Ohio, and then I worked a little bit outside of Ohio as well, around the Midwest region and a few other places as well, a bit more down south, and that's how I met yourself.
That's right. We met in Columbus, and I would be doing these whiskey tastings, and any bartender I'd meet would ask me, "Do you know Martin? Do you know Martin?" Because everybody knew Martin, and you were notorious for your ability to hawk the old Irish whiskey from sometimes above a bar countertop, if I recall correctly.
What? What's this? You remember more than I do.
On top of a bar counter, I've heard you doing toasts from a top of a counter.
Yeah. Oh, God bless them. Yeah, they are unwelcome sometimes, maybe, but yeah. Anyway, basically, the job as a brand ambassador, my job was to get to know as many people as I possibly could, and like your job it's impossible to describe that job really in any sort of a succinct way, but it got me to the point where I knew hundreds, thousands of people that if I didn't know something, that I knew somebody else who would know it, and there was always somebody to, like, the Irish whiskey industry and the liquor industry in general is a great industry, really. You know, we're not, for the most part, we're all kind to each other, we're all nice to each other, most of us are good people, you know, and if you don't know something, there's always, if you're a good fella, there's somebody on the end of the line that you can call and you can ask their opinion. So that was my job, I guess, to get through knowing as many people as I possibly could, to get as many people as I possibly could talking about the brand that I was working for then, Tullamore Dew, and get as many people interested in it when I wasn't directly the one delivering the good news, but other people might be just interested in the brand through indirect activities that would be going on.
How long were you in Columbus for? Was it 18 months or?
I was 18 months, yeah, exactly, with Columbus, and then at the end of that point, my contract with Tullamore Dew ran out, and I was in that position, and the visa to stay in America ran out directly in that position. And then I was looking at the positions in whether to stay with the company or whether to not to stay with the company, and there was Bua, which was on my mind as well. I was sort of thinking about it in the background, which we'll get into more as well. But
you disappeared one day. I remember turning around and Martin was no longer in Columbus, and I didn't know whether your contract was up or what. And I remember going back to Ireland, and I'm walking through the halls in Dublin Castle of Whiskey Live, and there's somebody grabs me by the shoulder, and it's yourself, and you said, "I'm after starting a whiskey company."
Which Whiskey Live was that now? There was 2 of them there. It was
so that would have been a year and a bit ago, about almost a year and a half ago at this stage.
Yeah, and you were probably on your 6th session of Whiskey Live at that stage, or
I had bought up all available tickets of Whiskey Live. Yeah.
You do the 2 days or the 3 days, and you do both sessions on all the days.
That's right. Back-to-back sessions. You said, I'm over here in Ireland, and I'm working on this whiskey company and I want to tell you all about it. And then you disappeared into the crowd again, never to be seen again. And then next thing I know, you're in Columbus, you're back in Columbus again. So tell me how did you come back to Columbus? Like what was the, so why is Bua part of Columbus and part of Ohio? How did that come about?
So Bua is we're directly linked to Columbus, Ohio. One of my business partners is Pat Byrne of Burns Pub. Burns Pub will be a pillar of the Irish community in not just in Columbus, really in Ohio, really, and all the Irish cultural activities there. The Burns family be well and truly involved in it, and so I suppose I got to know Pat from being the Tullamore Dew brand ambassador. I guess I used to live kind of close. I used to live there in Grandview, just a few blocks away from the pub, and I spent a bit of time propping up the bar there, I suppose, when I was working, and maybe when I wasn't working. But I'd come in and wearing the ear off of Pat, and I guess Pat eventually he realised this lad's not going away, and he figured if you can't beat him, join him. So myself and Pat became good friends then, and after a while, we were both so involved. Like the Irish whiskey industry is something not just that we were involved in, but we were like really interested in and passionate about it, because well, it's something that is integrally Irish. Really, is Irish whiskey. It's a product that stretches out all over the world that we can be proud of, and its Irishness. But I guess we got to talking that I suppose like any bar conversation, a dreamy bar conversation, wouldn't it be great to do this? But I suppose we talked about it a little bit more, and we talked about it a little bit more, and and eventually it didn't seem as much of a silly idea as it might have at the start. And when I came to the end of my contract with Tullamore Dew, and I decided not to stick with the company, I got to looking at how actually it would be possible to set up an Irish whiskey company, and I suppose I spent the next year. It takes surprisingly long, really. There's a lot of ins and outs and a lot of things I needed to learn. There's a lot of things I still need to learn, but I suppose I spent it working on it.
Andrew shared there, like Burns Pub is where the Irish meet. There's no doubt about it. If you're Irish of Irish ancestry, Burns Pub is kind of the epicenter in Columbus, and for a lot of Ohio, for Ohioans who would come out of the woodwork to enjoy their Irishness in no better surroundings than Burns Pub. And it's been a fixture in Ohio for more than 50 years, or Pat's father ran it before him, I think, or it's been in the family for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's in the family. Yeah, it's the three brothers who own it. So Brian, Rick, and Pat, between them, it's kind of a running joke. Everybody calls it Pat Burns Pub, and Ricky works there himself.
25 years.
Ricky and Ricky's kids work there, but and sure Brian as well will be in, and but it's Pat Burns Pub, but it's between the three of them. It's a family business, and it's something very Irish as well, but you can feel that when you walk in the doors.
You can. So while we're talking, we might as well be sipping. So what happened was this company was born, Bua Irish Whiskey, and this is your first product. This is what you launched, perfectly timed to coincide with a global pandemic. You launched Bua Irish Whiskey. So Martin, tell us about this whiskey. And we'll have a little old taster. I'm going to pour a bit into a glass, but I want to make sure people can see that here. But tell us what you decided to launch first.
So, I guess the brand, or the brand itself, I guess the brand story. We decided it's called Bua. Like Bua is the name of the brand. Bua is the Irish word for a win or victory in Irish. And we're very much we're an underdog's brand, and the underdog is something integrally Irish as well. It's we're synonymous with being the underdog, and we're historically well known as being insanely good at being an underdog and resisting against a force or a strength that's bigger than us, or more powerful than us, or stronger than us, and less crack than us. But that's kind of, it's the underdog is something that we wanted to relate to. We when we were creating the brand, we didn't want to. I guess we didn't want to attach ourselves to, could have named it Kennedy's Irish Whiskey or Burns Irish Whiskey or some other, Irish name, but, unless you're a Jameson or something, you've been around for years and you're a pillar of the industry, that's not something that anybody's going to relate to. But we want to, so I guess that's where we were going for when we were, we're calling it Bua, so the Irish word for win or victory, because there's an underdog in all of us. All of us we're working on something, we're struggling with something, we're trying to better ourselves in some way, we're trying to, we might be stressed out about something, we might be working on our bank balance, working to better ourselves for our family. We all have this underdog sort of fight in all of us. So I guess Bua is a brand that tips the hat to the underdog, and that's, I suppose, where we're going with the hare and the tortoise there on the front and center, the bottle with the whiskey shining through. The original underdog, the original small guy, and the hard worker and the never give upper. So,
the Irish tortoise being constantly chased by the hare. The hare won't win. The tortoise will always win.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's going to try anyway. But that's when we were creating the whiskey, creating the brand, creating the personality. That's, I guess, where we were going with it. But I guess the whiskey itself. So the whiskey, we buy stocks of. We're very lucky, and definitely make no bones about it. We buy stocks of liquid from Great Northern Distillery in County Louth. It's owned by John Teeling, who is the father of the Teeling Irish Whiskey Company. Great Northern Distillery is actually the site of the old Harp Brewery up in Dundalk there. So we buy stocks of single grain whiskey and single malt whiskey from Great Northern Distillery, and then we buy further barrels ourselves. So from the stocks that we've chosen, the particular whiskies that we've chosen to buy, and the barrels, we buy further finishing barrels as well, and we further finish those whiskies to the finish and maturation regimes that we want to get, I guess, the flavor that we want. So it's a 5-barrel maturation. We use 5 different types of barrels. We use freshly charred barrels, which is kind of the really interesting one, I think. We also use bourbon barrels and tawny port barrels and white muscatel barrels and Oloroso sherry barrels. So we picked some difficult to could have picked some easy to get barrels, finishing maturation barrels, and we could have picked some difficult ones to get. And naturally, as a startup company, we chose the more difficult option. But
5 barrels is unusual, isn't it? 5 barrel maturation. I don't know that I come across it.
Yeah. There's a few more premium whiskies that like high level premium whiskies that use like say Tullamore, the single malts. They're 14-year-old. They use a 4-barrel maturation. There's other whiskeys that they might use a little bit more than 2 to 3 would sort of be the usual. You might be matured for the most of its maturation life in a bourbon barrel, and then might get a finished sherry cask or a port cask or something.
So how does 5-barrel maturation work? So for those who aren't familiar with blends and vatting and components of whiskies, is it that there are components that are aged separately in the different barrels, or is it that all of the whiskey is aged together in 5 different barrels? How does that work?
So all of the whiskey, what's in the bottle basically is a blend of different whiskies that would these whiskies they mightn't have hit every single barrel that is in the barrel maturation regime, but like, let's say, for example, our single grain whiskey. Our single grain whiskey has come from freshly charred barrels. Like it has been put straight in on its stave distillation, it's been put into freshly charred barrels, like barrels that the inside has been pared down and it's been recharred back up again. So the whiskey it's hitting like fresh, like charred wood, and that we like absolutely loved what that did to the single grain whiskey, as opposed to you know that sort of light caramellic sort of light undertone that you would normally get from grain whiskey, typically matured in bourbon barrels. It gave much more of like a toffee caramel note to it, and we loved everything that did. Kind of just wanted more of it, really. So I bought more freshly charred barrels, and we took the single grain whiskey from the freshly charred barrels, what were ex-freshly charred barrels, and we put this single grain whiskey into more freshly charred barrels. So it got like a double hit of fresh char there. Then the malt whiskey is a little bit of a different story. So the malt whiskey would have been matured from its day of distillation or most of the malt whiskey, its day of distillation in bourbon barrels. So then at a point when you want to add like another layer of flavor, you think, well, how might we finish this malt whiskey? So what we did is we bought two different types of barrels there. We bought white muscatel barrels and tawny port barrels. And both of those barrels the sugar content is quite high. Tawny port it's a port that has to be a minimum of 10 years of age or 10 years spent in the barrel. So there's been quite a lot of time for the port to have an influence on the barrel. So we bought those barrels, those like high sugar content tawny port and white muscatel barrels, and they had like a fantastic influence in the space of like anywhere between like 3 to 6 months, and had like a fantastic influence. So those are 4 of the 5 barrels, and then there was like another last. Not that it was lacking, but we did want to add one last level of flavor, which is something which is sort of typical of Irish whiskey as well. And we added some more malt whiskey, which has been matured in sherry casks from its day of distillation. And that added like a lovely sort of like a little bit of a nutty nose to the whiskey, like a little bit almost like a hazelnutty nose to the whiskey. So yeah.
I mentioned before we went on air how I was walking past the desk. I'd open up the bottle of whiskey 10 minutes before we came on, and I was letting it sit in the glass. And I walked past the desk, and something caught my nose. I thought, what is that? And I thought there was a bowl of fruit here, and I'm not joking. I thought there was a peach or something, or white grapes, and I nosed around like a bloodhound to find what it was, and it was the whiskey. And this does not smell like the nose on this is very different. There's a sweetness that comes from this nose that belies its age, and we've been conditioned of late to think of good whiskies being very old whiskies, when there are many factors contributing to the quality of a whiskey. You've gone down the road of choosing, I think it says here, 3 to 6 years. The whiskey components are 3 to 6 years, but you have a very complex casking program then that is adding layers of complexity and a sweetness to this that would belie its years. Yeah.
And again, that comes down a lot to the grain whiskey that we use. It's definitely a premium grain whiskey that we buy, and we further premiumize it, I guess, if that's a word, to add in another layer of sweetness, but also those high sugar content barrels that we use for the finishing maturation. So it does add like a lot of body, but as well a lot of extra little sweetness. So yeah, so that's sort of where we're going with that.
So it's light in color, but there's no color added to it. It's no caramel.
Yeah, and that's always a nice surprise as well for when people they think it's going to be it is, I guess, people call it it's a very light whiskey. Like it's a very non-offensive whiskey. Yeah. It doesn't. There's me banging away there. Sorry, I'm gonna turn off that sound.
People are texting you saying, "I'm seeing you on the live stream."
It's a very non-offensive whiskey. It doesn't bite the back of the throat.
Yeah.
It's very easy drinking, but also in terms of its flavor, its flavor. There's no added color, no added flavorings. It's non-chill filtered. There's none of the the flavoring filtered out and left in a bottling plant's filters. There's no apologies made for exactly what the flavor of a good Irish whiskey should be. There's no added coloring, which as well would add. You'd notice it sometimes. You would notice it if you were comparing, a whiskey the same whiskey which didn't have added coloring and the same whiskey which did have added coloring. But we're not going to add any added coloring to any of our whiskeys. It's exactly as it should be, and that sort of fools people a little bit. They see a lighter whiskey and they think it's not going to pack much of a punch in the flavor department. But I think we have achieved.
You can't trust your eyes with this one because the complexity, the flavor. When I first saw it, I thought definitely a young whiskey, and then I tasted it, and immediately the complexity of it hit me. There are layers and layers and layers of this as it's sitting in as it goes down my throat now, and I'm listening to you talk. There's like guava and pear coming out at me. There's just these white fruits. White fruits are just coming out again and again and again, which you're not typically associating complexity of flavor with a light colored whiskey and a younger whiskey. But I'm delighted to see that you're unapologetic in saying, no, this is what it is. It's good whiskey aged in good barrels, and it's going to give you you're going to be happy with it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I don't think there's definitely no point in hiding. We're proud of the fact that we have a whiskey that's blended from components between 3 to 6 years old. We're definitely going to stand behind that, and we're not going to add any veils or any falseness. I don't want to say, because there are reasons why companies would want to add coloring to their whiskey. They would want to add artificial coloring to their whiskey because maybe they want to add like a sameness from batch to batch, because there are some consumers who would walk into, say, a shop and they would see a previous batch's whiskey of the same brand, and it might look a different color. It might taste the same, but it might look a different color, and they say, well, what's wrong with that?
Right. But you've not hidden the color. You've even on the label. I mean, the tortoise and the hare are even clear, so that you get more visibility to the color of the whiskey inside it.
Yeah.
We've got a few questions in there. Connor asks, I'm curious about the tasting notes. Are those notes and flavor what you aimed for, or were they a pleasant surprise?
No, they were. It's a bit of both, to be honest. Like barrels are living, breathing things. You never really fully know what you're going to end up with a barrel. You can. I mean, the best blenders in the world will tell you that they're, to a certain extent, you're going to end up with something that you didn't expect. You could end up with something which is broadly in line with what you wanted to. You probably will. The best blenders, and there's fantastic blenders out there that I would never even claim to come anywhere near in terms of my knowledge, that have been in the industry for decades. But a living, breathing thing like just a barrel of wood, it's always going to surprise you. For example, we would have had there's different tawny port barrels from the same vineyard, the same vintage, came on the same lorry, and had the same malt whiskey put into it, and the color variation that would have come out of this barrel from the color variation, and even a little bit to a certain extent the taste variation that would have come out between one barrel and the barrel like directly adjacent to it, they could be different. And I guess that's where the skill of a blender, a really good blender, comes in, is they're able to take a little bit of this in this batch, take a little bit more of it in the next batch, take a little bit less of something else in that batch, and blend them together to get some sort of consistency from batch to batch. But
Pat Byrne, your partner in crime, is also on the live stream, and he's answering some questions in there from folks who are asking about availability. So I know that right now the availability is limited to Ireland and the state of Ohio. Are there plans to go further afield in time?
There are, very much so. We wanted to launch in Ohio because of obviously both of our links to Ohio. Pat's definite link to Ohio and the Irish American community in Ohio. But also Ohio was good to me. So we wanted our launch date in America to be Ohio. And that was the plan, I guess, pre-pandemic. And then this little surprise rolled around, and that the plans were kind of put on hold a little bit. And I was out in America like directly after the New Year, and I was out there until after Paddy's Day, and I had to fly home because or else I wouldn't be let to fly home. I wasn't sure whether flight companies were going to stop flying, whether they were all going to shut down. So
I know. Currently,
I'm getting a few things that needed to be getting done as well. So it's a good chance to, I guess, step back from the hustle and bustle of pushing a startup brand out there, come back here and get a few bits and pieces done. But there are plans. As soon as we can, we will be launching pushing into a few more states out there. States like West Virginia is one of them that we're thinking of. Kentucky is another one that we're thinking of. We also want to push into a bigger city. We're definitely a less beaten track brand, but definitely want to push into a bigger city like a Chicago or a New York as well at some stage in the as near as is reasonably possible future, I guess.
And I remember texting you about maybe about 2 months ago, and I think you'd launched the brand maybe a week or two before. And I was sitting in a whiskey bar in California, and there on their menu was Bua. And I thought, I was blown away. I thought, okay, in California, 2 weeks after he's launched, has he already got distribution in California? And how is it already on a printed menu that looks like it's been there for years? And I texted you and you said, they must have ordered it from Ireland and brought it in to have it on their menu. And sure enough, that's what they did. They brought it in maybe a few days after you launched, shipped it out to their bar in California, put it on their menu and had it for sale there. This bar is Whiskey House in San Diego. I don't think they want to not have an Irish whiskey that exists. So you are further afield maybe than you even tried to get the first few weeks of the launch.
It's amazing the hype that how people are so interested in they got their ear to the ground so much with with the Irish whiskey industry. It's great to hear, really. Like there was because we had nothing to do with that. They obviously just have their ear to the ground with the Irish whiskey industry. But there was even bars over in Columbus that, when we launched there in Ohio, and as soon as it was available in liquor stores, in the select amount of liquor stores that we had available from the start, there was bars in Ohio that, friends of mine that I'd be walking in and I was like, oh, nice one, you bought a bottle. And I was like, I'd be saying to the guys, I was like, the owner or the buyer or whatever, I didn't even realize that you knew that I was doing this. I was about to come in and tell you that I was doing it. And they'd be telling me, I didn't. So there's some people that just have their ear to the ground with the industry, and they're any new thing or anything that has a good bit of a word about it or hype about it, they're
tuned into it. Yeah, there's massive interest in what's happening, and the world of Irish whiskey is expanding so fast, and we're seeing more and more people who want to know, like they want to know the people behind the whiskey. They want to know the stories like this is great crack. Now when you see in the comments, people are sharing that, okay, now they want to buy a bottle because they understand more about it, or they understand the story or the person behind it or the integrity of it. And that's driving, I think, this uptake when people feel a little bit more connected to it. So I hope you do get further afield with it, because I think people need to try different whiskies, and Jameson has led the market in opening it up for people like yourselves to come in and have access to a market that's maybe been warmed up. But I think you're able to do things now that bigger companies can't do with your more kind of nimble production and smaller runs and test things and try things and kind of ride in and take advantage of the 20 years of marketing money from the bigger boys that came before.
Yeah, they've been good to us. All right. Yeah, no, to be honest, like the Jameson definitely has it. Jameson and other bigger brands, Dew and Powers and Bushmills, they have opened up and kept the market open. I mean, sure, the market was in desolation. It feels like not really too long ago. It definitely is good to have an industry that is so rapidly expanding. It's just the fastest growing spirits category in the world, Irish whiskey. I hope it stays that way. It's a drink that is, it's non-offensive. Whiskey, I mean, it's a drink that is not offensive. It's very approachable. It's sort of like an entry to whiskey. And then, within Irish whiskey, there are so many different variations that you can go down and paths that you come down as well. Like pot still whiskey is great, and then even like there's more experiments going on within pot still whiskey, or
right.
even peated whiskey, or single malt whiskey as well. Single grain whiskey as well is another. That's an area I think that is going to expand a little bit as well, and as well as what different brands can do with barrels.
Well, that's where I think the likes of whiskey bottlers and bonders are very interesting, and like what you're doing and what whiskey bonders who have their own bond are doing is, like John Teeling pumps out whiskey at an extraordinary rate, but he's not thinking about 5 cask finishes, or he's not thinking about the way you're looking at it, which is saying, well, I actually see a gap over here, and here's how I'd like to enter the market. Will you help me put it into this many casks? And they have all of the resources available to do it, but they're not creating the profiles the way independent bottlers and bonders are, which is a great collaboration, I think, between, you don't have to invest in a site the size of Great Northern Distillery, and John Teeling doesn't have to worry about marketing his whiskey. Together, you close that loop from kind of soup to nuts. And I love that collaboration, I think, is great.
Yeah, like that. They're pumping out massive amounts of liquids. They're laying down stock, which, might or might not be used in 10, 20, 30 years, please God, even down the line, but it's great, that I can take, we can take a completely different approach. We can buy exactly whatever the stocks that we want, and we can add like our own layer of complexity. Like, I guess we add our own layer of complexity in, selecting the stocks, obviously, of whiskey that we want to buy, but then we add our own layer of complexity as well, in that we can buy whatever barrels from whatever part of the world that we want, and add our own influence there. And that's kind of lucky with Irish whiskey that we can do that. We don't. The rule with Irish whiskey is it has to be aged in wood for a period of a minimum of 3 years. It can be whatever type of wood. It can be wood that had something in it before, something that didn't have something in it before. It can be whatever influence on the wood. Like whether it's toasted, whether it's charred, whether it's highly charred.
Yes.
So many things. Yeah.
Quiveen has a question. This may be a quick answer. How many people are involved in the Bua operation between sourcing liquid and casks, blending, cask maintenance, and bottling? Are we looking at half the company here in front of us?
It's a very small operation. You're looking at a third of the operation. So there's myself, and there's Pat involved, and my father is an investor in the company as well.
Nice.
That's it. It's a pretty small company, small payroll.
Sure. Listen, even Microsoft and Apple started in garages,
Right. My office is wherever that is. That's that phone is that phone is my office, and my office is in my pocket. I don't.
He's always on. Martin's available. If you message Martin at 3:00 in the morning, he'll reply in 5 minutes. He's always got that phone. I'd say he sleeps the phone beside the pillow.
The stress, Barry. That's the stress.
Devin says that Milwaukee, Wisconsin is eager to try Bua. Jay Fulton, good friend of Pat and Shamrock Club and the Irish in Ohio. He misses you. Hopes you're well.
Good to hear from you.
Let me see, what other questions did we get here that I want to get you to answer. Will we see Bua in Dublin Whiskey Live in November?
Who knows even if Whiskey Live will be going on. Right now, I would love to have Bua in Whiskey Live in sometime in the near future, as near as possible future. Everything's just so uncertain now with large gatherings, especially like Whiskey Live. There was a roadmap put out there today that it'll be mid-July by the time pubs here in Ireland are allowed to open with social distancing going on. Whiskey Live is definitely on the radar anyway. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a showcase Irish whiskey event, and definitely want to be involved in that, because I think they're talking about expanding it. Their next, I believe Celtic Whiskey are talking about expanding it for their next Whiskey Live.
The Docklands, the convention centre in the Docklands. So yeah, please God, that goes ahead. Fingers crossed for that. It'd be great to meet everyone there. I know that if the countries are opened up by November, I'm going to try and take a bunch of people over to Ireland for Whiskey Live and storm the stands and drink as much whiskey as we possibly can. Diego's looking forward to seeing it in Arizona. So you'll see through all these comments afterwards, Mark, you'll see where people are raising their hand and saying, bring it to us. So you might plan out your distribution map there based on the comments. Michigan is close. Las Vegas, one in Las Vegas. Minneapolis. We got a map of America here.
I'm taking
and
note.
Shelley, San Diego would be a great city. Yeah, so Shelley, I think you noted that it is in Whiskey House behind the bar. But I drove past Whiskey House today, and of course it's boarded up as most bars are, sadly. So hopefully we'll see that returning to normal at some point very soon. So does anybody else have any questions? Peter says he'd love to be on that flight to Ireland. Peter, there'll be a spot for you if it's if the countries are opened up. We'll be doing it. Whiskey Live better happen, said Cassandra. Johnny wants you to be in New York City, and Steve wants you to bring. Or JJ wants it in Toronto. Steve wants it in Colorado. Ryan wants it in Baton Rouge. Martin, you're going to be a busy man. You and Pat will be driving the length and breadth of the country, dropping off bottles.
I'm going to the office right away and I'll work on it. But yeah, no, I mean, that's the plan now. I mean, nothing. There's no wheels have stopped rolling now, you know, just because bars have closed. People are still buying, and people have moved to buying in the off-premise locations, you know, from liquor stores and that. So it's great to see, you know, that the industry is not stopping by any stretch of the word. So,
no, and it'll come back. It'll definitely come back. In Ireland, the whiskey Bua is available. Was it through Celtic Whiskey Shop? Is where you were?
Yeah, one of the Celtic Whiskey Shop can distribute as well throughout the country, but it is available in Celtic Whiskey Shop, and I think they even sell internationally as well. So I think they ship
it can be shipped, yeah.
Yeah.
So check out Celtic Whiskey Shop. And also, I know in Ohio, you can find details of what whiskies and spirits are available on the Ohio Liquor Control website, ohlq.com. And I know some of our Ohio folks are well familiar with that, because John asks any chance of getting a bottle to the Sky in the Ground in Wexford. Yeah, so Celtic Whiskey Shop, John, would be your best bet there.
I'll spin down, John.
Oh, you'll drop one down, will you?
Not too far away. Well, maybe it's outside 2 kilometers. We'll work on it. I'll snake down to Wexford.
There you go now. The connection happened here through a live stream. Peter Duggan, good to see you, Peter, up in New England. He wants a bit of Bua as well. Greg asks if there's any Bua swag available. Colleen wants a T-shirt. Yeah, I was lucky enough to get a nice Bua T-shirt there that I've been enjoying the last few days. We might see if we can get hold of some Bua things to give away.
Yeah. And let's see if I can get some. Let's see if I can maybe get some to you. There as well. Pat's pub is not open, but Pat was selling them. From the bar there before things started closing up.
Okay.
But,
we'll see if we can get hold of some swag. Mm-hmm. Pat is busy at the moment anyway. He's loading up the truck. As soon as he can leave the house, he's going to be delivering Bua all over the country. This is what I love about the live stream here now, Martin. It's like we come on here on a Friday night and we don't know who's going to turn up. We have the likes of yourself and Pat, you know, behind a whiskey brand. We have people who run like the Sky in the Ground in Wexford. We've got great characters from the whiskey world and people who enjoy whiskey as well. Like who did I see here commenting? Who was it? Where Brian, for example, Brian Redden down in Cincinnati, sitting in the back with the last of his first bottle of Bua. Everyone coming together, kind of share little stories about what they're doing with their drink. Great way to connect. So I'm loving all the banter here that's happening. Richard O'Kelly says that it's the social distancing is extended to 5 kilometers from Tuesday. So if you can get to the Sky in the Ground after Tuesday, you might be in good shape.
It's a good 5 kilometers anyway, I'd say.
Good 5 kilometers. And there was a little poem put in here for you that I want to put up here for Andrew Schumann. A toast to you, Martin. Grand as President Jack. Ask not what whiskey did for him. Ask what he did for whiskey. It's amber so sweet, like a kiss from Jackie O. Victory for Martin and Bua for me. There you go.
Give me blush, Andrew.
There's all kinds of shenanigans happening now on the live stream.
Serenading me here live.
We'll get you up to the castle at Belturbet in Cavan. Pubs to reopen hopefully from August 10th. Yeah, so let's fingers crossed, ladies and lads, that we get these pubs in Ireland open up, the pubs in the United States open up. So people like Martin and Pat who are taking chances, putting their own money on the line to do something they're passionate about, to bring a drop of whiskey to us, to introduce us to new cask finishes, to take risks. We want the pubs to open up so that we can enjoy their whiskies. But in the meantime, if you do find Bua on the shelf, if you find Bua on an online store, do yourself a favor, pick up a bottle, and do the same for any small independent whiskey company that has taken a gamble. And because not every one of these whiskey companies is going to survive this, so we have to do our best to support them as best we can. And we're trying to bring as many of them on here on the live stream to showcase their whiskies, in the hope that more people get introduced. So Martin, hopefully after this, your phone is buzzing at 4 o'clock in the morning from people looking to get hold of a bottle here and a bottle there. So that will be the hope. So yeah, look out for Bua, everybody. Joe Moore, who is in the Dublin airport, works at the Loop. Best of luck. Wishes you luck with that, Martin.
Good job.
And let me see. And we've already got people who want to talk about a launch in Wisconsin for you once things open back up. So lots of things to browse there in the comments later on once you're sipping on a drop of your own whiskey. So Martin, feel free to stick around, but we're going to move on and talk to do a little bit of cocktail making as well. But it's been an absolute pleasure connecting with you and getting to introduce you to rabid fans of Irish whiskey. I'm very impressed with the whiskey. I'm delighted to have it on the shelf, and I look forward to enjoying this as the summer gets warmer. This will be a lovely, cool, fruity drink, fruity whiskey, which will sit lovely on the palate. So thanks a million for joining us on the live stream.
No, Barry, thank you. Thanks for having us, and thanks to all the followers out there, supporting us. What you said, it does mean a lot especially for small whiskey companies. Every little bit of support, it really definitely does mean a lot to get the support from people that I haven't even had a chance to meet yet. So yeah, no, thanks for having us on, and thanks for listening to us. Cheers.
Cheers, Martin. We'll talk to you again soon. Launch it.
Yeah. All the best.
Martin Kennedy from Bua Irish Whiskey. Great crack, great lad, and really delighted to see people taking a chance, taking a risk. Martin was exposed to the whiskey world through Tullamore Dew, and then went out there and decided to put his money where his mouth is, found the passion for Irish whiskey, found some partners and some helpers, and together have launched an Irish whiskey company, something that 10 years ago would have been very difficult to do, 15 years ago almost impossible. And today we're seeing more small, independent whiskey brands, bottlers and bonders emerging, because they share a passion for Ireland, they share a passion for Irish whiskey, and they share a passion for community and the crack. So I'm delighted that Martin was able to share his whiskey with us. It's a really lovely drop, and it's a surprising flavor profile. I wasn't expecting it, but that 5 cask finish is a 5 barrel maturation, should I say, is a remarkable, gives a remarkable complexity to the whiskey. So thank you to Martin. So let me see what questions we have up here before we start rolling into the next stage of our live stream. Pull up the comments there. So everyone's saying best of luck. Thanks to everyone for being so generous with your questions. Pat Byrne, thanks to you as well, Pat Byrne, for joining in on the crack. And hopefully we'll see more of Bua on the shelves. A few people said they could be persuaded to go to Wisconsin for a whiskey and cheese tour. We'll be adding all these destinations to our list. So a couple of things to catch you up on before I bring in our next guest. Our next guest is Mark Cooney, who we're going to bring in, who is a principal bartender at the Library Cocktail Bar in the Detroit Club in Detroit, who's going to, I'm really excited to talk to Mark. But before we do that, I want to share a couple of things with you that I've been working on over the past week. So many of you will know that I host a podcast called Stories and Sips. And we're now releasing a podcast episode every single week. And this week we had a great episode released, conversation with Eric Ryan. And for those of you who don't know who Eric Ryan is the founder of the Cork Whiskey Walk. Cork, of course, is the city in Ireland where I'm from, second biggest city in Ireland after Dublin. And Eric Ryan is a remarkable knowledge on Irish whiskey, on Cork history, and especially Cork whiskey. And I was lucky enough to do the Cork Whiskey Walk with Eric back in November. And I thought it was going to be an hour-long whiskey walk around the city of Cork. It turned out to be 5 or 6 hours with Eric and a group of other people, turning every corner in the city to find new connections with Cork's distilling past. So Cork has probably 400 years of distilling history and heritage, which is incredible. And it, of course, culminates in the Middleton Distillery in County Cork, which has been around since 1825. but it has played a pivotal role, as have other distilleries in the city. So I would love for you to check out, if you haven't already checked out that episode of Stories and Sips, I'd really love you to take a listen to it. Stories and Sips is available on all of your favorite podcast players, Spotify, Apple, Google Play, Stitcher, anywhere you get your podcast, you'll find each week you'll find an episode of Stories and Sips. So I was really delighted to chat with Eric. He's a legend in the whiskey world. And if anyone's interested in Irish history, Cork history, and Irish whiskey, I think you'll really enjoy it. This Wednesday, I'll be releasing another episode, and this week's episode is with Sir Maurice O'Connell. And Sir Maurice O'Connell is a descendant of the famous Irishman Daniel O'Connell, who is known as the Liberator or the Emancipator, who helped lead the move for Catholic emancipation for the Catholics in Ireland back in the 1800s, a legendary figure that was part of all of our childhood history books. Daniel O'Connell from County Kerry, who people like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King were inspired by. And Daniel O'Connell's descendant, Sir Maurice O'Connell, has a remarkable estate in Kerry on the banks of Lough Lean, and there he is blending his own whiskey called the Liberator. And I had a fantastic chat with Maurice this week, and I'll be releasing that episode on Wednesday. And Maurice has a remarkable family history, but also a remarkable interest and approach to whiskey. He's growing his own barley on his own estate. He's sending that for distillation. And at the same time, he is opening up his home to guests who can come and stay in this remarkable home on the banks of the lakes in Killarney and blend their own whiskey perhaps, or see how the operation works. So a really great interview. Loved having Maurice on for a chat. And I think you're going to be really interested in listening to that. So look out for that on your favorite podcast player this Wednesday. Brian says great knowledge and stories on there too, not just current events. Thanks, Brian. Sean says, checked it out. It's a great listen. Great stuff. Ryan says, Stories and Sips, celebrating Irish whiskey. Indeed, we are celebrating Irish whiskey as much as we possibly can. Quiveen said that Maurice is a gentleman, full of whiskey info, and had a great time after calling down to him. Get the Liberator if you can. So I'll be showcasing one of Maurice's only whiskey, the Liberator, on a future live stream. I've got a bottle on the way so that we can taste it. I'll try and get Maurice on to talk us through it. But in the meantime, do check out Stories and Sips on your favorite podcast player this Wednesday. I'll be dropping that episode. So let me know again what's in your glass. What are you drinking? Julie is drinking Powers 3 Swallow, which is great. Love Powers 3 Swallow. Fantastic drop of whiskey. Stacey is about to order a bottle of the Liberator. Highly recommended, Stacey. Lovely tawny port finish to that whiskey, which is beautiful sweetness to it. Really encourage you to try that out. Joe says that Stories and Sips is well worth a listen. Sure, what else have we got to be doing? That's right. Only listen to me because you have nothing else to be doing. That's the only reason you will possibly tune in. Totally understand. So now we're going to move on to, I'm going to bring on another guest. And I came across Mark Cooney a couple of weeks ago on Instagram, and Mark and I connected over Powers Irish Whiskey, which is a great thing to connect over. We have a joint love of Irish whiskey and a joint love of Powers Irish Whiskey, and Mark has been doing interesting things with Powers Irish Whiskey and with other Irish whiskey cocktails. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Mark on and introduce him. Hi, Mark. How are you doing?
Hello. How are you doing this evening?
I'm great. Mark, where are you at the moment?
So I'm in Detroit, Michigan right now. It's actually quite sunny today, and we're seeing a little bit of warm weather, which has been a nice little reprieve from the cold and the wet that we've been having. So
nice.
Yeah,
Mark, you have more of an Irish name than I do. Mark Cooney. There has to be an Irish connection there somehow.
Yeah, so I went to Dublin about 5 years ago to audition for my master's degree at the Royal Irish Academy of Music. And from there, we traveled southwest over like Barra to Milltown, Mabley, went to the Cliffs of Moher, all this other stuff like that. And from there, they have this entire thing inside of where the Cliffs of Moher are, where you can like look up your last name, and sure as hell, there's like Cooney, my family crest, all this stuff, which was no surprise. Like my grandmother is from Ireland, so it's just a matter of where and what Cooney,
Right. Did you manage to find where in Ireland you could trace that part of the Cooney family back to?
County Clare.
County Clare.
Yeah, but there are just so many, and it's the third most common last name in Ireland, apparently. So, it was like, oh, okay, well, there it is. But, it's very exciting stuff. I'm hoping, you were talking about like the travel ban and all that stuff. I just got accepted into the University of Limerick.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, for my second master's degree in Irish music and traditional performance.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm hoping that all this stuff kind of goes out of the way, and I can, leave the States and, be over there for quite some time.
Nice. That's awesome. So what musical instruments do you play?
So I play 11 total.
11?
11, yeah. Can't change a tire in a car, but can play 11. But my first degrees were in the oboe and English horn. So I went to school for orchestral music, oboe and English horn performance. But I also play the whistle, the Irish flute. Been trying my hand at the pipes. They're very, very difficult. Been trying my hand for quite some time. So
I should have told you to bring a few instruments with you. You could play some music as you make the cocktails.
I mean that would be a thing. It's difficult to do all of those at once. But yeah, it's good times.
So when we connected, Mark, you shared with me your Instagram, and I was blown away by these incredibly beautiful cocktails, like works of art, absolute masterpieces of cocktail creations that you had put together. And then I discovered, to my joy, that many of these had Irish connections, Irish components. And you mentioned how you've been doing some cocktail creation for the Powers brand as well in the past. That's how you kind of got interested in Irish. Was that how you got interested in Irish whiskey?
Oh, no, not at all. No, I've been, Irish whiskey has been something that's been in my life since I was able to drink. We grew up in a Powers household. My grandmother had a bottle of Powers, at the table all the time. Redbreast 12, which I'm going to be featuring this evening as well, was a symbol of something that she really loved. She really enjoyed the bird on it. But Powers in itself, this particular whiskey, was very near and dear to our family, where we would have a bottle of this when we knew that we were going to have a very prosperous and fortunate year. So no, Irish whiskey has definitely been a passion of mine. It's my heritage. It's my, it's the stuff that I enjoy talking about. And in terms of, it's a very underutilized spirit, both in, what people want to talk about and how they associate it with, and then also within the whole cocktail realm. It's one of those things that when you look at the dynamic qualities and what you can utilize it for and all of the subtle flavors that are there. I mean, Martin was talking about, he used 5 different casks for his whiskey, and it comes out this pale yellow hay, but here you are telling me it's like this bouquet of
explosion. Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing where it's like, it's such a dynamic spirit. And it's one that is extremely looked over, because we, a lot of times people are just thinking about taking shots of Jameson. It's like, well, no, let's look at the grand picture of it all, the actual totalness of it.
So for those of you who are just joining, I'm here with Mark Cooney. Mark is the principal bartender at the Library Cocktail Bar in the Detroit Club in Detroit. And Detroit, of course, has a rich Irish history. In fact, there's a whole area of Detroit named for my city in Cork, Cork town in Detroit, which was populated by the Irish after the famine and has remained kind of an Irish center ever since, hasn't it?
Yeah, so that's actually where my grandmother moved. Is
that right?
Yeah. So she had a house there until she was about 35, and then she moved out to the suburbs. But yeah.
Interesting.
Corktown is definitely, a great spot. A lot of Irish culture, heritage there. We have an Irish American league there.
That's right.
Gaelic League. I've been a member there since I was 9, something like that. Doing Friday fish dinners and Sunday roasts. It's always a good time.
So Peter Duggan, who a friend of mine he's on the live stream as well. He's in the comments there shouting Cork. I had a night of cocktails with Peter in Corktown, introduced me to some great bars up there a few years back. So for those of you who are curious about cocktails and the use of Irish whiskey in cocktails, and whether that is scandalous or appropriate or whatever you feel yourself, if you've got questions or thoughts or comments, please put them in the comments there, and we'll ask Mark his thoughts on various aspects of how to use Irish whiskey and cocktails, what you should and shouldn't do. But Mark, you have very generously offered your time to make a few different cocktails for us live on the live stream, which, look, I think that Irish whiskey should absolutely be used in cocktails. I don't mind if people put Redbreast 21-year-old in a cocktail, because the better the ingredient, the better the drink. So I would love to hear, Mark, your approach and your beliefs about Irish whiskey, and kind of if you could lead us through one of the cocktails that you've promised to show us.
So I have 3, if that's okay with you. Do it. Go from very traditional to kind of branching out a little bit more, playing a classic, and then something that is my take on a very old Irish drink. So the first one I want to do was kind of my introduction to Irish whiskey being in a drink that was outside of Jameson and ginger beer or whatever. So this is a very lovely drink called a Tipperary, named after that particular place. And this is going to be kind of a play on a Bijou Manhattan. So what we're doing is 2 dashes of Angostura bitters, about a half an ounce of sweet vermouth, which is, just a fortified wine. I'm sorry, 3/4 of an ounce of sweet vermouth. And then from there, we're going to use a little bit of green Chartreuse. This is a really, really lovely, lovely French liqueur made by Carthusian monks. Half ounce of this. This is extremely herbal. Very, very robust star anise qualities to it. And then one of my favorites, Redbreast 12, is going to go into this. So with this particular drink, that Chartreuse is really going to shine through in almost anything that you do. Half an ounce of the Redbreast 12. So you want to use, ounce and a half of the Redbreast 12. You want to use a little, I decided to change up a little bit of the proportions to add more of the Irish whiskey and use a more robust Irish whiskey that has a bit of a backbone to it.
Nobody's going to complain that you add more Irish whiskey.
What's that?
Nobody's going to complain that you add more Irish whiskey.
Oh, no, not at all. And in this particular cocktail, you're going to want to stir it as opposed to shaking it. And the reason that you want to stir, this is just adding a chill and dilution, and it's not necessarily aerating it. You don't want to bruise all those beautiful qualities. General rule of thumb is if it's opaque, give it a shake. If not, go ahead and give it a stir. And then you just want to go ahead and serve it up in one of these lovely Nick and Nora glasses, or a coupe glass or rocks glass, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And then I really enjoy, some people will say lemon peel. I really enjoy orange peel, and just express the oils over it. Just over top of that drink. Maybe you rub it on the stem so that those oils get on your hands. And when you bring it to your lips, you're smelling that orange. Seeing how it plays the anise qualities and the fennel and the clove of the chartreuse, and also those really beautiful sherry, oak, spice notes that the Redbreast is having there.
Is that the big contribution there from the whiskey, the Irish whiskey, the pot still whiskey you're using? You're looking for the sherry notes. Is that what you're going for?
Yeah. So the sherry and the maturity that Redbreast has, the 12. I have to tell you, I made a Bijou, this particular drink, a Tipperary with Redbreast cask strength. And it was just fantastic. It was like one of the best things I've ever had in my entire life.
Yeah.
But basically, with this particular type of cocktail, specifically anything that is boozy and spirit forward is using this particular ingredient, you definitely want to use something that's a little bit more robust, has a bit more of a backbone, so that holds its weight against the chartreuse.
I see.
Yeah.
And Jessica asked if we'll post pictures or recipes for these later. Yeah, so Jessica, we've got some recipe here on the screen, but I will post them in our Facebook group. For those of you who aren't in the group, Irish Whiskey Fans of America, I'll post the recipes, and we'll get some pictures as well of these cocktails from Mark. So Redbreast 12 is a controversial one for a cocktail. I know we've seen some fist fights breaking out over the use of such a fantastic single pot still in a cocktail. But it sounds like you follow my line of thinking as well, which is the better the quality, the ingredients, the better the quality of the drink. Well,
absolutely. And, it's one of those things where you're combining this really beautiful liqueur with it. You know, Chartreuse in itself is just such a wondrous thing. You know, it's very dynamic. It's sweet. It's, you know, has earth to it. You know, and it really just plays so well with, you know, singles pot stilled whiskeys. If you shake it up with, you know, some type of citrus and maybe a little bit of simple syrup or something, or, you know, Luxardo Maraschino, make a little riff on the last word cocktail. I mean, it's just absolutely fantastic. But yeah, you know, it's primarily going into it. You want to use something that's a little bit more robust to kind of, so that it handles this.
Yes.
Not to, you know, but I definitely think that, you know, Irish whiskey has a place in cocktails where, you know, it can do anything. It can adapt to anything that you possibly want, and you're showcasing the flavors, and it's only exemplified by what you're using in it.
Right. Yeah. I think there's a misconception that a cocktail has to be a tall drink, full of ice. Some amazing cocktails are just about the collaboration between spirits, the complementary nature of, like you mentioned, booze forward with cherry. You mentioned the different. You're complementing these spirits very well together. If you haven't tried that style of a cocktail, then it's easy to think that any cocktail must have a salted rim or be full of ice, which is of course not the case.
Oh, that's wait. I'm sorry. I just saw a question that popped up.
MP asked, what's the best Irish whiskey cocktail in your mind? I know you're making 3 of them for us tonight.
Oh, yeah, the best Irish whiskey cocktail in my mind is definitely the one you're buying for me.
There you go. The true bartender's answer right there. Diplomatic.
Actually, the next one I'm making is probably one of the best Irish whiskey cocktails I've had. It's originally called Cameron's Kick, and this was a split-based cocktail utilizing Speyside Scotch, Irish whiskey, fresh lemon juice, and a spiced nut syrup called orgeat, which is pretty common in a lot of tiki drinks. So your Mai Tais traditionally have orgeat in them. Irish whiskey, you know, Isle of Man Mai Tai essentially. So what I did with this was just use a little bit of fresh lemon juice, 3/4 of an ounce of that. And then I made my own orgeat. So what you're basically doing is you're taking the milk of some type of legume, nut, whatever you want. I like almonds, so I made almonds. And I did a cold brew orgeat where I steeped Irish breakfast tea for a period of 22 hours, and then just combined that liquid, measured it out, and combined that liquid with white sugar. So 3/4 of an ounce of that. And then I wanted to use Bushmills. And the reason for using Bushmills is, again, it was that idea that it was supposed to be split base of Scotch and Irish whiskey. So I kind of wanted to have something that had a little bit more forest floor and earth to it, but also that really nice fruit that was a little bit more, I don't want to say dynamic, but had more of that Scotch presence to kind of make up for not having it in there. And I did 2 whole ounces of this guy, of Bushmills here. And this is one of those ones that, with the fact that we're using a sugar and a citrus, you're going to want to shake it. So you put the 2 together and shake it up. It's the best sound in the world. And for this, I wanted to have it in a nice rocks glass. I was feeling fancy and cute, so I decided to use a large cube. And for anything, I'm going to double strain this. You don't necessarily have to do this, but this is just to kind of get the ice chunks out of it. And then from there, just a little bit of Angostura bitters on top of it. Nice little color contrast. Your friends will think you're fancy. and then a fantastic little lime wheel, or lemon wheel rather. And this is just like a really nice, lovely, refreshing cocktail that still has all the qualities of Bushmills. It's still very present. And then if you're feeling super fancy, you can get yourself a little atomizer or like an old perfume sprayer, put some Lafroig in there and just spray it on there.
Very fancy.
Yeah. And that way you have like the nice peat moss come to your nose.
Everybody's trying to get me into peat and peated whiskey, and now I see you're trying to sneak it in atomized spray format onto the top of a cocktail.
I'm telling you,
you're safe.
You taste with your eyes and your nose first, and it's a completely different experience.
That's amazing. So that one's called the Slide from Grace?
Slide from Grace. Certainly not because if you have too many of them, your general disposition and life will change.
We're going to add these cocktails to the Facebook group, Irish Whiskey Fans of America. For those of you who aren't in there, you should go in there. Irish Whiskey Fans of America, I'm showing you there on the screen, is what you need to search for in Facebook and join more than 4,300 Irish whiskey fans who are having a great time chatting and connecting every day in there. We'll add in these recipes later on tonight or early tomorrow morning. We've got some questions, Mark, that we should go into while you're generous enough with your time here. The first one is from Robert. He asks, what's the taste profile difference between green and yellow Chartreuse, and do both of them work well with Irish whiskey?
So the difference in them are the proof and the botanicals that are used. Green Chartreuse is going to be a higher proof, a little bit more booze forward. Think more winter spices, lots of cloves, cinnamon, fennel. We don't necessarily know exactly what goes into it because it's a very secret recipe that these monks have. Yellow Chartreuse is going to be a lower proof. It's going to be sweeter. Think more honey and clove, lilac, springtime. In terms of the type of cocktail, or would they both work? Yeah, absolutely. There's a really nice drink called a Naked and Famous that traditionally calls for mezcal, but there's that really great whiskey, Irish whiskey that came out with that was aged in mezcal barrels. And yellow Chartreuse, Aperol, lemon, and that particular Irish whiskey would just be absolutely out of this world. And certainly if you wanted to have something that wasn't as spirit forward, the first drink that I used or that I made, if you wanted to substitute yellow Chartreuse for it and maybe use a nice dry vermouth or blanc vermouth in place of the sweet vermouth, it would be absolutely fantastic. Just a little bit lighter Irish whiskey. Your Jameson cask-made IPA would be great with that. Right. Original Jameson would be wonderful. Powers Gold Label would be absolutely fantastic with it to add a little bit more robust and earth to it. But yeah, it's those two definitely are heavy hitters, and I think play very well with Irish whiskey as a whole.
I see a few of the comments talking about old fashions and how, like Greg said, that might be as far as he would go with it with an Irish whiskey cocktail. Well, the reality there, Greg, I found the same, is that if you're willing to go to an old fashioned, you're already halfway there, because you're opening yourself up to sweetness, to complementary flavor profiles that work really well together. What Mark's introducing us to here is only a few degrees to the right or the left of that. And I think that if you're already at the old fashioned, I'd say try some of the more complex ones. Like I've got a black barrel old fashioned here, which I absolutely love, but I love going to a bar where there's no menu and the cocktail bartender will ask me what flavors I like, and then they'll start suggesting cocktails and they'll put together a flavor profile that I would never have chosen myself, or a cocktail that I wouldn't know anything about. And when they get that right, when they are able to determine what you might like from what you've shared with them, you'll never forget that cocktail, and you'll from then on be looking for that special cocktail, won't you?
And I think a lot of the times we have the idea of a cocktail in our head, being that it's going to be this like sugary sweet, you're going to lose your toes and get a case of diabetes as soon as you drink it. And the thing is, people like myself, my beverage director at the Detroit Club, we've taken a lot of time to be able to make sure that we were balancing all these flavors and never overshadowing what the integrity of the spirit is to begin with. We do the research on what is making up this flavor profile and simply accentuating it so that, if it's a hot, 110 degree day and you come in and you're like, oh, I want something light and refreshing, you're not going to want an old fashioned. I mean, it's this very boozy thing, but
Right.
you have, even some type of Irish whiskey sour, something like that. It just definitely takes a whole new dynamic to it. And the way that Irish whiskey plays with fruits and teas, different types of sugars and nuts, it's really this incredible, vast thing, just like the flavor profiles of a lot of these things.
So, Mark, I know you've got a third cocktail which really dives into that history, that the Irish history piece, which I'm excited for you to share. Yeah. While you gather your pieces for that, I want to share with our listeners and our viewers a contest that we're running at the moment. I'm going to put it up here on the screen to help people see it. Let me get this right here. So, Conical Tea Distillery, we had Conical Tea with Sean Scully from Conical Tea on our live stream last week, and Sean's family operates the Conical Tea Distillery in West Cork in Ireland, and they are expanding their footprint in the United States, and they're doing a lot of hyper local collaborations with breweries in the states that they distribute. And they just today launched their collaboration with New England Brewing Company, and it's called Conical Tea Imperial Stout Trooper Cask Finish Irish Whiskey, where they send over the casks from the Imperial Stout beer from the New England Brewing Company to Cork, to Conical Tea, and they put in their blended Irish whiskey into those casks to finish them for a period of months, and then they bottle the whiskey and they send it back over to New England. Conical Tea have been kind enough to give us a bottle of this to give away to one of our viewers and one of our members of our Facebook group. You'll find the details of it in Irish Whiskey Fans of America in our Facebook group. I encourage you to go in and enter into that. It's a fantastic whiskey. I had a chance to try it, and it is I'm loving these beer collaborations because it's introducing beer drinkers to whiskey and whiskey drinkers to beer that they wouldn't otherwise have tried. So go to our Facebook group and try your luck at winning that bottle. So I'm going to go back to Mark Cooney, who's busy preparing a historic Irish whiskey drink, which I had to even research further and refine my history knowledge about this one. But Mark, tell us what's next.
So this is my play on a traditional Irish drink called Scaltine, which is Irish for scalding or hot, if I'm not mistaken. And basically, this is before the Irish coffee. This was something that was popularized by the Hellfire Club that would hang out in the hills of Dublin, and they would drink this, and there was accounts of death and conjuring up demons and all sorts of crazy occult stuff. But essentially, it was a combination of whiskey, butter, milk, and honey with black pepper. So what I decided to do today was kind of play with it, take my own ideas into it. So I made this thing called a Scaltine cordial. And basically this is made of lactic acid, which is just that stuff that kind of gives the tang to think like Greek yogurt or kefir. Just a little bit of that for some brightness and citrus notes. I did some cardamom, some ginger, Ceylon tea, and wild Irish honey, and cinnamon sticks, and just kind of made this small little cordial. And then I also melted some butter inside of it. So we're using 3/4 of an ounce of this beautiful cordial. And I really wanted to go with Powers Gold Label on this because I just thought it was so fitting with everything and how this cocktail particularly works. So we're using 2 whole ounces of that. And then from there, this is up to your preference. The milk aspect of it is something that's interesting. I'm going to go ahead and add just a pre-measured 1 ounce of whole milk. And you don't want to shake this with any ice at all. You just want to shake it together to kind of mix it. And then from there, I unfortunately left all of my Irish coffee mugs at my job, and I can't get in there, which is very, very sad for me. But you're going to have to go ahead and pour it in there. And then I'm going to top it off with fresh Ceylon tea, freshly brewed. Just a pinch of cayenne pepper for the Hellfire Club, why not? And then some freshly grated nutmeg. for the aromas. And this is a really wonderful hot drink that if maybe you're not feeling an Irish coffee, definitely look into the history of this drink. It was this really interesting thing where a person who could make scaltine in the traditional manner was very coveted in a lot of cities and communities. But if you want to know about this particular version of it, where I kind of dissected it, broke it down, surely you can ask me, and it's great.
And the Joe chimed in, the Montpelier Hill up in the Wicklow Mountains is where the Hellfire Club would meet.
That's right, the Wicklow Mountains, yeah.
Yeah, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and renowned for black magic and debauchery and kind of amoral behavior,
Exactly.
which is often associated with Irish whiskey, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, that looks gorgeous. So that's a cold, almost like a cold Irish coffee in many ways.
Kind of. So the tea that I made was hot just because I was feeling that, but you could certainly top it off with cold tea if you wanted to. Another interesting way to think about it is anything with a fat content, you can milk wash it. If you add just a little bit of, you make your drink and you add the milk to it with just a little bit of citrus, it's going to cause it to curdle, and then you strain it out, and it's this really, really great, really great sustainable drink that lasts forever. I made a milk punch not too long ago that I've been enjoying with Powers 3 Swallow of all things, with blackberries. But this was popularized by Ben Franklin. So there's a lot of really rich history in terms of how this is used and what the American cocktail culture is. And bringing in things like, the idea of scaltine, using Irish whiskey teas, that particular story. And, I had no idea what this was up until, shortly before you and I had talked, and it plagued my mind.
It's I love the intersection of history, whiskey, cocktails, all those things together make for a great night out. Peter Duggan says that we need a road trip to Detroit to visit you, Mark, and the Gaelic League. So we should, when the roads open up again and we're all traveling again, we should head up to Detroit to see you, Mark.
Please, I love that.
Cassandra has a question. If you use aminos instead, would you add a little simple syrup?
Aminos, as in the protein compound?
Maybe amino acids. Cassandra, maybe you can clarify that one.
Yeah.
MP says that we need this guy in our house ASAP.
Yeah. I think going back to the question prior, simple syrup, if you wanted to add sweetness to the drink, you can, and just remember, with that, it's you have the control over how sweet you want it. You can always add more. Start slow. Start with a quarter of an ounce. Fill up to a half, 3/4, whatever you want to do.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Mark, and thanks for that, Cassandra. Somebody asked, what am I drinking? I'm drinking a Black Barrel Old Fashioned, not as adventurous as the cocktails Mark has prepared. I like Black Barrel in an Old Fashioned. My recipe for that is very simple. It's 2 ounces of Black Barrel. It's a half an ounce of simple syrup that I've made using turbinado. It's a brown sugar that I make from equal parts sugar and water. And I boil that up and I cool it down and I leave it in the fridge. 3 or 4 drops of Angostura bitters, and then I express an orange peel over mine as well, and normally a big strong cube of ice in mine, and that's my old fashioned. Very simple. Let me see what other questions we have for Mark. Mark, tell us while people are typing in their questions. Tell us about your involvement with Powers. I noticed Powers Irish Whiskey sharing some of your cocktail making recently.
Yeah, so it was a really awesome experience and something that I'm still, as far as I know, I'm still doing with them. I'm working with the global brand ambassador of Powers, Mr. Derek, right now. And basically what we were doing is, with the rebranding of the bottle, taking a fresh new approach to cocktail development and how to make things with this particular whiskey. An Irish whiskey for Irish people, but certainly doesn't get enough play or enough use in the cocktail realm. And it was just how to utilize it in a new, approachable way for people to understand it. So I started very small, using just like fresh blackberries and honey. We're also doing a sustainability project with local beekeepers in Ireland. So we are showcasing the honey aspect of this particular whiskey, also the way that it can be made at home, and just making a really, really great time out of it. I mean, it was some of the best stuff that I have done in terms of really getting the creative juices flowing, but something that is, I don't have the entirety of my bar. It's literally just my kitchen and like what I have in the spice cabinet or whatever fruits or berries are about to get thrown out. Or that are, fresher than most or whatever they may be. So it was definitely an interesting challenge, but it was, just basically focusing on the rebranding of the bottle, the idea that this is something that is still there, that is to be used and enjoyed with a rich history, but we can take a fresh new approach to it, knowing that it is a very common name with uncommon possibilities within the future.
How well known is Powers in Detroit? Do you have people who are aware of the brand? Because I know you're like this new brand of the bottle is designed to introduce more people to the great liquid that it's always been. But how well known is it?
So here is the thing with Powers Irish Whiskey. It is a bartender's Irish whiskey. So when we go to, like myself, a hospitality professional, or the other friends of mine who enjoy Irish whiskey, when we go out and we see a bottle of Powers Gold or a bottle of John Lane, that is like the go-to pour that we're looking for. It's interesting because it's an industry, from my experience anyway. I can't speak for everybody that I know, but from my experience, it's definitely an industry favorite in terms of it's this very dynamic, gorgeous, quality whiskey, and I would say it's very well known within the hospitality amongst my professionals and peers that I know.
It's great to see it getting more attention. I know that the bottle redesign has been controversial enough for Irish people who maybe grew up like I did with the old shape, but I think we'd be even more frustrated and upset if Powers disappeared because nobody was ordering it. So I think
that was the weird thing. Talking to Derek, I had never even realized that it was in jeopardy, because it was like something that I always had growing up, something that was always around, this, not necessarily the three swallows expression, but, the gold label was extremely common for me. So when I first saw this bottle, I looked at it and I'm like, wait a minute, what the heck is this? What's going on?
Yes.
But I mean, it's still, this fresh eyes and new clothes are good for it. I actually think it's, quite, unique. I think it's wonderful that they're paying homage to the kilns that were underneath the street that are,
Johnson.
I really think that's wonderful that they're doing that. And,
Lorcan's got a good point. He says that the new bottle will attract younger people, but maybe the branding is out of sync with the old shape. Yeah. And I think that it'll have its detractors and its lovers. But I think overall, I'm just delighted that I can still get hold of it. And if it takes up more space on a shelf in a bar and allows somebody to ask, what's that? I think that the proof will be in the uptick in sales if that happens.
I mean, it could be, it could be in a gasoline can or, an old Gatorade bottle for all I care, as long as they're making it and putting it on the shelves and selling it to me.
Maureen has a question for you, Mark, with your cocktail knowledge. Can you substitute Fernet Branca for the Chartreuse, or would that be your...
What do you know about Fernet Branca? Very, very, very different flavor profiles. Fernet Branca is not similar to green Chartreuse whatsoever. That is going to be way more eucalyptus, way more bitter Amaro qualities to it. But a lovely drink with Fernet Branca that you could use Irish whiskey in. Just use 2 ounces of Irish whiskey, a 1/4 ounce of Fernet Branca, a 1/2 ounce of simple syrup, and stir it.
Interesting. I got to try that.
Yeah. It's called, traditionally it's done with rye whiskey. It's called Toronto.
Okay.
But
Lorcan says, please keep the juice the same. Yeah, Lorcan, to my understanding, the whiskey is going to remain the same. The bottle is just the one that's changed. So now there's going to be 3 bottles in the range of Powers. There's the Powers John's Lane, which is the flagship. There's Powers 3 Swallow, a single pot still whiskey as well, which we have right here in front of us. And then also Powers Gold Label, which we have in front of us in the new livery. All of the bottles will eventually look like the new Powers Gold Label, which doesn't have a gold label anymore. But all of the 3 bottles will look like that. So get used to it, folks. They're not going away, whether you like them or not. If you like the whiskey, keep buying them. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and anyone who's joined us this evening, if you have any questions on cocktail preparation, or you just want to say hi, there's my Instagram link. Feel free to get a hold of me, send me a message. I'm an open book, so would love to get a hold of you and talk more about Powers Irish whiskey, how Hanson Berry is in his turtleneck.
For recognizing that, I appreciate that. I was going to compliment on my turtleneck. We're going to cut a dash tonight.
Yeah, we're almost like a full handsome person.
Almost. That's my life goal. One day.
Okay.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate your time. Amazing cocktails. We're going to put the recipes for these in our Facebook group, and I'll share them on our my Instagram stories as well on Irish Whiskey Barry. For those of you who want to connect with Mark, please do go to his instagram.com/mark.cooney. And I'm sure he'd love to chat with you. Cocktails for us. We'll put the recipes up there. Mark, thank you for your time. We'll come back to you again in the future for more insights into the cocktail world. And I'm delighted to see you combining Irish history. It's great to see it.
That's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Barry. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
That was Mark Cooney, fan of Irish whiskey cocktails, and I don't to the fore. So kudos to Mark for what he's doing. I want to hear more from Mark in the future. I'm going to move on now to my final drink of the evening, and that is Jameson Crested. For those of you who are still hanging in here, and I know there's many of you, I'm opening up one of my favorite affordable Irish whiskies. Often can be, yes, you can find it in Canada, you can find it in Europe, but you cannot, when I posted a picture of it. So Jameson Crested, formerly known as Jameson, that was bottled. It might surprise you to know that C3 Jameson sold all their whiskey unders and whiskey bottlers who would age it further themselves or who would bottle it under their name and Jameson's name on the label. And in 1963, Jameson decided that they were going to consolidate that element of whiskey production and take control of it and ensure consistency. So in 1963, the first bottling that happened in the Bow Street Distillery was Jameson Crested. And at the time, it would have been known as Jameson Crested 10. In 1963, this has changed a few times, bars in old pubs in Ireland. And what is the difference between this and regular Jameson? Well, the difference between this and whiskey and grain whiskey than this does. This has a higher pot still component, a higher barley, malted and unmalted barley component. And that makes for a more... this does not get sold in the United States because the belief is that it would be cannibalized by the sales of Jameson because it's not its own unique audience in the United States that would allow for the expense of marketing such a product across the United States and getting distribution and ensuring you can put the right money behind it to sell sufficient quantities of it. So if you do, you can get deliveries of it from online retailers, certainly in our Jameson Crested. Let me know what's in your glass as I sip on this and read your comments and answer your questions. There's Sean O'Neill. Steve is onto the Black Barrel. Johnny has just finished a few down to the bottom. John didn't know this was available in Canada. Good reason to cross the border. As long as you're not bootlegging. Lorcan asks, how did I find the original compared to this? Lorcan, I am very late to the whiskey game myself, and I would not have been a Crested 10 drinker. And I've been living in the United States for quite a while now and would not have had access. They liked that it had maybe perhaps a higher sherry component to that whiskey. So for me, I don't know. And so if it did have a higher sherry component, I would certainly like to try it. I'm a big fan of the of sherry contribution to whiskey. Good man Richard joining me in a glass of Crested as well. Lovely drop of whiskey, drinking in my Powers glass. Peter said he would have liked Mark's thoughts on the Sugar House in Corktown. Peter, would you believe that Mark worked in the Sugar House? And he may well have been there that night you and I were there, running up very expensive cocktail bills, sitting there solving the problems of the world together. Yeah, Mark was formerly a bartender in the Sugar House before going to the Library Cocktail Bar in the Detroit Clubs and bottles. Yeah, it was. And so this white label that you see on the bottle back in the 1940s, 50s, prior to the Jameson taking back control of this, the white label would have been how the bonders, the whiskey bonders, they would have bottled their whiskey with white labels. And this was kind of an homage a little bit to the white label, I believe, or it might be the other way around. Joe Moore, if you're still on the line, you might correct me on that. But Jameson, they had two different color labels, whether it was bottled in-house, which wouldn't have been the case with Jameson, but certainly with Powers. Powers would have bottled some in-house from an early stage. And Jameson, then there was a period where there was some bottling happened externally and some bottling happened internally. But this, has been around since 1963, and it might be considered in Ireland like an old man drink, Jameson Crested, but great value to be had. If you order this even in the Middleton Distillery or the Bow Street Distillery, it's probably one of the cheapest things you'll order on the menu. And for those of you who like single pots of whiskey, you're getting even more bang for your buck, even more value. Jeff said he brought back a couple of Crested bottles from Ireland a few years back, so he just cracked one open. Fantastic. Ashley says that his understanding was that Crested was 8 years old. Yep, it's no longer 10 years old. There was a time that it was a 10-year-old liquid. I've heard varying stories on it, depending on who you talk to. As you may well be aware at this stage, Ireland is full of stories, and we have to figure out who to believe. Some people have told me that the name Crested 10 refers to the warehouse number that the original whiskey came from, and others have told me that it was a 10-year-old whiskey. In any case, it's no longer, if it ever was, it's no longer a 10-year-old whiskey. And 8 years old would sound about right. Jessica said that Crested is one of the samples on the back office tour at the Dublin Distillery, the Bow Street Distillery in Jameson. And JJ says that the Powers glass looks amazing. Isn't it a great glass? So why it's shaped like this, where the liquid sits exactly halfway up the glass, is that Powers prides themselves on the cut of their distillate. When they're distilling their spirit, they take more of the center cut. So there's three elements really to the distillate. As you're moving from one still to the next, you're taking cuts of that liquid, and you're only taking forward the cut that you want to proceed to the next stage of distillation, and you're leaving others behind. There's the heads, the tails, and the heart. And the heart of the distillate is maybe the best quality. It's the smallest piece. The heads and the tails might be cut off in order for you to take the heart forward. But sometimes you'll take more of the heads forward or more of the tails forward. But with Powers, they take more of they focus on the heart, and they cut away the tails, they cut away the heads, and they focus on the heart of the distillate. It's the most expensive piece, and it means that it takes more ingredients to make the same amount of liquid that you might do with fewer other ingredients for different whiskeys. But Powers is all about the heart of the distillate. So that's why these glasses reflect the whiskey sitting at the heart of the glass, which I think is nice. It's got a nice solid base to it, so it's a heavier glass as well. Diego's looking forward to trying the Black Barrel old-fashioned recipe. Diego, I would be lying to you if I told you that I didn't have one of these Black Barrel old-fashions every single night, and sometimes a couple more. Mrs. Stories and Sips and I have a good old time at night, sitting down playing a game of cards and sipping on old-fashions. It's just a lovely, nice way to round out the day, nice way to end the evening, you know? Lorcan says, talking about cocktails, I brought a mate to a cocktail bar in London, 25 euros each. He nearly clapped, 25 pounds each. He nearly claps paying the bill. Cocktails can be expensive, but so can many other things. And it depends where we choose to spend our money. Sean says you can find the Crested 10 at online auction sites, the old Crested. That's right. Peter asks is there any information on what Powers might be releasing this year? I don't have any information, Peter, that there's anything new coming from Powers, except perhaps some single casks that won't unfortunately appear in the United States, but will be released in Ireland. I don't have any information on that, but that's just a guess. The new branding, I believe, is their biggest endeavor this year, but we could be surprised. I'd be the last person to hear about it anyway, if they do release something. But if I do hear anything, I will definitely share it with you. Let me see. Everyone in the comments is talking about where to get Crested, so you can all have your conversations about that there. Julie says that Jameson 12 is as close as she gets to the Crested. Yeah, so shipping has gone up dramatically. Brian, great to see you here. Nice to connect with you again. the shipping from Ireland has gone up for a number of reasons. First of all, before this global pandemic struck, there were additional levies and tariffs, of course, placed on whiskies coming from Europe, single malts predominantly, but that trickled down to other things, I'm sure, in terms of the cost and trying to spread the cost and that expense across the board. But also now the fact that there are fewer flights, cargo flights coming from Europe, it's driving up the cost of cargo. And I know that online retailers have gone from 50 to, in Brian's case, as he mentioned here, as much as 80 euros a bottle to get a bottle from Ireland to the United States. That is a sad reality of a couple of things, that the tariffs and this terrible virus that is doing a lot of damage at the moment. So hopefully in time that comes down. The good news is that if you order multiple bottles, of course, you bring down the average cost per bottle, but you have to be buying a lot to justify it. Saying that, there is a way to make savings. In Ireland, tax is typically included in the price you see, and it's not added additionally. That means that it's disguised, and you might not know that there's tax, the value-added tax, VAT, included in your whiskey purchase. So I just ordered a bottle of whiskey from Ireland that is listed at a certain price at 80, it's about 100 euros. But when I take off the value-added tax and I add in the shipping, it almost breaks even. So you have to just make sure that your retailer is taking off the value-added tax, because they don't have to charge it to overseas sales. So if they are charging it, they shouldn't be. So make sure that you're ordering from a retailer that doesn't charge value-added tax for overseas sales. Steve asks, let me see your question there, Steve. Steve asks, can I talk more about what's going on with the tariffs? So that I'm certainly no expert on this, and I'm sure there are people online who are more familiar with this than I am. The tariffs that were applied by the United States on European whiskies were in retaliation to tariffs that were applied from Europe on American whiskies, which themselves were in retaliation to tariffs that were applied from the United States to airplane manufacturers, Airbus, I believe, particularly. In any case, it's a complex web, but here's what we need to know: how it affects Irish whiskey. It affects Irish whiskey mostly on the single malt side. So single malt whiskies, so Scottish whiskies, English whiskies that are single malt, and then whatever Irish whiskies are single malt, are subject to a 25%. Single malts on the island of Ireland come from Bushmills in Northern Ireland. Bushmills have taken a hit, and so the price of Bushmills has gone up in the United States for those Bushmills products that have been shipped in after the tariffs were hit. I've noticed the price of Bushmills 21 has gone up significantly, and I haven't seen it yet on the blended whiskies, which may have had sufficient quantities on hand in the United States for a while. But that's what we need to know, is that it's applied right now to single malts. The good news is that the vast majority of Irish whiskies are not single malts. They are single pot still, and they are blends, and to a tiny, tiny degree, single grain. But most Irish whiskey is blends, because most Irish whiskey, 90+% of Irish whiskey, is Jameson, Original, Tullamore Dew, and Bushmills. That's it. That's what most Irish whiskey consists of. That's the reality of it. We're here drinking our Buas and our Crested and our Black Barrels, but the reality is that these are a small part of Irish whiskey sales. So the good news is that for now, the majority of Irish whiskey is without tariff. It's nothing to do with religion. We don't mix religion with whiskey in Ireland. I often hear that some whiskies are Protestant and some are Catholic. We never heard that growing up in Ireland. It doesn't play any role in tariffs or how we drink or buy our whiskey. It's not something we're particularly fond of as a statement. This is purely a tariff that is based on retaliatory measures for what's happening in the global kind of economic back and forth. Well, I hope that the distilleries are open. I hope that the distilleries are ready to welcome guests in September. The hope is that they will be. I do suggest that you visit storiesandsipps.com and access the distillery map that we've got there, Barton, to show you all 31 distilleries that are currently producing on the island of Ireland. I would focus on Jameson. There's a massive part of the old Middleton tour that is focused on how they made whiskey historically and the stories that come from 200 years almost of distilling history. So the South Coast is remarkable, is building a remarkable tour of whiskies, really, from Dingle southwest all the way over to Waterford in the southeast. So that would be my recommendation. But getting closer to the time, Barton, jump into the Facebook group and ask some questions, and we can map out an itinerary for you, and we can easily do that. Cassandra said that Irish whiskey is its own religion. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Peter asks if I can talk more about pot stills. Irish whiskey seems to be more oily to me. Is that due to the pot still? All right, so I will always add a caveat here that I'm not a whiskey expert. I'm an enthusiast and I'm not an academic, and I will give you my understanding of what I know and answer your question in as best a way as I can. A single pot still whiskey is not about the equipment as much as it is about the ingredients. And single pot still whiskey is a whiskey that consists of whiskey does go the spirit does go through. The mash does go through 3 stills, typically for pot still whiskey, 3 copper pot stills, triple distillation. But it is the unmalted barley component of the ingredients that contributes to the oiliness and the creaminess and the spiciness of the whiskey compared to a single malt. And that unique texture and flavor profile is as a result of adding in unmalted barley that has come from the fields, that has been milled, that has been added into the mash together with the malted barley, and together they are fermented and they are distilled through triple distillation. So that oiliness, of course, there is a chemical reaction happening that I would be operating without a license to try and explain to you, because I have no clue of the chemical compounds that are forming and the oiliness and how that's coming about. But suffice to say, it is as a result, to the best of my knowledge, of the unmalted barley component in pot still whiskey. Connor mentions that Lyons Distillery in Dublin is a must. I absolutely agree. Maybe the most beautiful distillery in Ireland. It's in an old church, fantastic, almost like an altar to Irish whiskey. They've got double distillation happening where an altar used to be in the old church in Dublin, right across from the Guinness Brewery, right beside Rowe & Co., the new distillery that's owned by Guinness's parent company, Diageo. That's well worth a visit as well. Caroline asks if I can do a printable map. I could, Caroline, but I might have to charge for it. Such would be the work and the labor that would go into it. In the meantime, go to storiesandsips.com and you'll find the map there. We might be able to do a printable one. But one of the reasons why we did this digitally was because I saw over the past 18 months, as I was watching the number of new distilleries coming online, I saw that old maps that people had printed were out of date very quickly. And I thought the easiest way to overcome that would be to create a ongoing, evolving, living map. And that's why it's online. And there are many companies that sell printed distillery maps. And I would argue that in the time it takes to ship one to you, a new distillery has opened in Ireland. So my online tool is designed to stay as current as possible. And the day a new distillery opens, it's going to be on that map. So Marshall, welcome. You're joining us late with your Dingle, batch number 3. I just got a bottle of that as well, Marshall, and I have yet to open it. Batch number 3 of Dingle is what would be known as the American batch. That was the first Dingle to make it over to American shores, which they're very, very proud of. And now they're on to batch number 5. So 3, 4, and 5 on American shores. But batch number 3 was the first one, and they're very proud of it, to hit American shores. Wayne is going to hit all the distilleries next year. Fantastic. Give me a shout, Wayne. I'll go along with you. Jessica says, pre-plan your route and figure on a maximum of 3 to 4 a day. That'll be some going. 3 to 4 a day. No joke. Let me see what other questions. Peter says, thanks for that explanation. Wayne says, God help you when Killowen release their own whiskey. So interestingly, Killowen, Ireland's smallest distillery and one of the most recently opened distilleries, have been releasing a series of 10-year-old whiskies, sourced whiskies, and they've been putting their own style on them, their own finish on them. I will have one of these Killowen whiskies on an upcoming live stream. It may be as early as next week, and we may have Brendan Carty, the founder of Killowen Distillery, on to talk about his whiskey, which would be fantastic. And just like Northern Irish people need a translator to understand me coming from the Republic of Ireland, we're going to need a translator to understand Brendan from the north of Ireland. But we'll do it because it'll be worth getting him on and having a chat about his whiskies. How much syrup do I use in an old-fashioned? Okay, so I'll show you the bottom of the glass here. So about half of that, let me see the best way to show you. Maybe a third of that would be simple syrup. So it's like this little much. It's about maybe a half of an ounce, not even a half of an ounce of simple syrup. I like mine a little bit sweeter. Others wouldn't put as much in. And that turbinado, super sweet. So, and I do 1 part sugar to 1 part water. So I like mine sweeter. So I had one last night, poured in the bourbon on top of it, or not the bourbon, the black barrel, bourbon barrels, black barrel on top of it, and discovered it wasn't sweet enough. So rather than take any of the whiskey out, we put a little bit more sugar syrup into it. Sheng asks, do I have a Patreon? Since I can't get a lot of Irish whiskey styles I see you discuss, perhaps I can drink vicariously through you. Sheng, that's very, very kind. Patreon is a service where you can give virtual tips to people. I don't have a Patreon at all. There's no way to give me money whatsoever. Instead, when we're next in person and the doors to pubs are open, the easiest way for us all to come together would be to find a pub where we could meet and buy each other drinks. And so we'll keep note of the drinks we want to buy each other. Thanks for that, though. So I see good man Martin Kennedy still there in the stream answering questions for folks. Good man yourself. Jessica says that she was definitely translating for her husband when they were in Cork with some of the old timers. Yeah, I'm from Cork, and I'll sometimes take a moment to understand what they're saying in Cork as well. But there's no better place to be than in Cork, experiencing that old Cork accent. Sheng lives in Wisconsin, an hour east of the Twin Cities. He can find decent stuff, but they can be hard to come by. Yeah, it is that the further you go in from the coasts, the harder it becomes to get some of these rarer and unusual and limited release whiskies. And it's purely for financial reasons, Sheng. Of course, the cost to market to a more rural population is so much higher, and it's very difficult to get a return on investment on marketing and people on the ground. And so, of course, the economics would push people to the cities of higher populations to sell their products, smaller footprint, higher density, and a chance of getting a good return on the investment there. JJ, thanks for joining us. You're dipping out of the lock-in. We'll be ending the lock-in shortly anyway. I have to get some dinner. Chris says we should go to the Detroit Club with Mark. We should head up there. Absolutely. Ashley asks, have I tried whiskey from other countries? I have, but not enough. Powers is one of my favorite outside of Scotch or bourbon. Yeah, I have. I could be schooled on any whiskey, including Irish, and even more so on Scotch or bourbon. Like what I'm sharing with you here is just enthusiasm and a passion that I've learned over the past 2-3 years. Before that, I had virtually no knowledge of Irish whiskey, to be quite honest with you. And it's just through a kind of a desire to learn and a kind of a curiosity and a fascination with the people and the places of Irish whiskey that has helped me kind of get to know some of these. I'd love to get more into an understanding of Japanese whiskeys. I'd love to go to Japan and see the distilleries. I'd love to do a proper in-depth tour of Scotch whiskey distilleries. I'd love to do proper in-depth tour of bourbon distilleries. And all of these things were always on the long finger. You know, it was always a case of, we'll do this at some point. But there's nothing like a lockdown to put things into perspective and force your hand to say, no, when this is over, we are definitely doing this, that, and the other thing. So I'd love to go to Japan. I'd love to go to Scotland. I'd love to go to Kentucky. So I will. So I'll come back to you then, Ashley, and I'll tell you what I like and what I don't like. So that's what we'll do. Until then, I'm probably going to be sticking with the Irish because I have a habit of that I keep ordering bottles of whiskey, and they keep showing up on my doorstep, which means I have to keep drinking them. Otherwise, we'll have to get rid of furniture to store all this whiskey. And Maureen will drink to that. So we'll all get together when this is all over. So look, I've almost finished my Crested. Got a little drop of it left here. It's been an absolute pleasure drinking with you, as usual. Peter says we should come down to Texas. 4 distilleries going from San Antonio all the way to Austin, and more going in often. James asked if I've tried an Irish Manhattan. I've not. I should try and make one. I just need to get my vermouth. And Barton wants to go to whiskey clubs in Ireland in September. We're all with you, Barton. Once these doors open up, and all signs point to this year, things opening up in Ireland, which would be fantastic. So listen, we're doing these every week, whether you like it or not. You don't have to show up, but I'll still be here. I won't kick you out. This is a lock-in. You're allowed to stay here for as long as you want. But as the bartender of the lock-in, when I eventually get tired and get hungry, I might kick you all out. And that's what I'm going to do now. So it's been a fantastic evening again. It's been a long week. This is a great way to unwind, bring on interesting people, talk about Irish whiskey, introduce you to new people and new Irish whiskies like Bua. Listen to smart, interesting, creative people like Mark Cooney in Detroit and Martin Kennedy in New Ross and Wexford, sharing their love and their passion for Irish whiskey and cocktails with us. And so we'll do more of that. We'll be bringing on interesting people. And before I go, I do want to remind you that we are running a contest, of course, for a bottle of the new Conical Tea Irish Whiskey, the collaboration with New England Brewing Company. So do go into the Facebook group. For those of you who haven't joined, it's Irish Whiskey Fans of America. Put it up here to show you. Irish Whiskey Fans of America. Go check that out if you're not already a member. There's 4,300 Irish whiskey people in there, Irish whiskey fans. Check that out. And also, coming up on Wednesday will be a new episode of Stories and Sips on your favorite podcast player, an episode where we're interviewing Sir Maurice O'Connell, direct descendant of Daniel O'Connell, the great liberator and the emancipator from the 1800s in Ireland, a great figure of Irish history. That'll be released on Wednesday. Some really interesting episodes coming up with people from J.J. Corrie, from the Dingle Distillery, and more. My goal is to have a new episode every Wednesday with an interesting person in the Irish whiskey industry. They may be a distiller, a blender, a bottler, a fan, doing something tangential to the industry, but they're all related to the Irish whiskey industry somehow. And then I'll be back here every single Friday, come hail, rain, or shine, to raise a glass with you, to toast our health, to come together as a community so that we don't have to drink alone, so we can build some friendships virtually until we get back in a room together and we shake hands and we hug and we drink Irish whiskey till the cows come home, and we do it in Ireland together. That's my goal. That's what I want for all of us. And I hope that you'll join me in a room somewhere in Ireland drinking whiskey when all this ends. So stay safe, wash your hands, and be well. Sláinte to you all. Thanks a million for keeping me company. I'll see you in the Facebook group, and I'll see you online, and I'll see you again next Friday. Sláinte.